What does that have to do with trade? I don't mind answering the question, but, you know, I'd like to do the trade.
It has to do with the other headline in the news, which is the Kavanaugh
I know, but how about talking about trade, and then we'll get to that. We'll do that a little bit later.
Do you think the
anybody have a trade? Go ahead.
I do have a second question on the Kavanaugh thing. When you get back to it, if you take that, you'll take that now.
No.
Okay.
Right, I'd like to turn
don't
to
do
Judge
that.
Kavanaugh.
Do you have, excuse me, do you have a question on trade? We'll do one or two more questions on trade.
You answered several questions
Okay,
on
don't do
trade.
that. That's not nice.
Mr.
Give her the mic, please.
Thank you very much.
All right, I don't know whether journalists get apoplectic at that or shake their head, but this is a first for the President of the United States, who loves to get the economic news, usually his best news, up top, out front, and this deal with Canada not coming along to a trade deal with Mexico, a sort of rework NAFTA without calling it NAFTA. But the President went one step further. I want pretty much the bulk of the questions initially to be on this historic trade agreement. That's his prerogative. But no other president has done it quite like this before him. He did take questions, and he did make news on that, and later on, of course, on the Brett Kavanaugh situation and whether he's trying to manipulate this FBI investigation. He said no. You know, they could talk to anyone and everyone they want to. The read on all this from Media Buzz host Howie Kurtz. Howie, what did you make of that?
Well, you know, the president was taking his Rose Garden victory lap, Neil, and he obviously decided he's going to produce this show. And he's saying to the reporters, no, we're doing trade in the A block. We'll get to Kavanaugh in the B block, but it's not time yet.
That's a very good comparison. Yeah, you're right. Now, had other presidents done it to that extent, other presidents like to get their own news out and say that at the start of a press conference, what have you. But he was actually timing to the questions what they would get into, and he would decide when they could switch.
Yeah, look, I can recall presidents, particularly when they're with foreign leaders on foreign soil, saying, we're here to talk about this, not the scandal back home.
Right.
But the idea is, look, this, you know, as you know better than anyone, this trade deal with Canada is a very big deal, even the New York Times calling it a win. But the press is far more interested in the controversy and the debate and the emotion surrounding the Kavanaugh nomination. I think it would have been a better look for the press corps to let a few more questions go by on trade, take the economy seriously. So many people are affected by this, and then get to Kavanaugh. You know he's not running out of there. You know he's going to answer, unlike other presidents, the most controversial questions about his embattled Supreme Court nominee. But it just was fascinating to watch the way he tried to dictate the timing and the pacing of the thing.
I like what you said about we're dealing with this in the A block, and later on I'll let you know what we're doing. One of the things I found interesting was the fact that he did not say he was not going to take questions on Kavanaugh, all the drama around that, just not right away. And I'm wondering if what he tried here, because it was a first for him, I believe, you follow it more closely in the media than I do, he might try this again in the future, like he does another press conference, even one of these ones where he's getting off Marine One or getting back on Marine One, that this might be sort of like the model.
I think what happened last week at the UN when he went on for about 80 minutes, some people said, oh, he was rambling, whatever, but he was having a good time. He was kind of playing with the press, criticizing, sometimes praising. I think he really enjoyed himself. I think the people around him would like to see the president do more of that. So this went on for quite a while. There's been some grumbling in the press corps, Neil, here in Washington about, well, why aren't there more White House press briefings? And I think there should be a lot of press briefings, but it's so much better to hear from the leader of the free world and for journalists to have the chance to push back. And, you know, it's not like he was choking off the thing that is, you know, a huge story, what's going to happen with Kavanaugh. And he made news on that as well, as you noted, in terms of expanding the scope of the FBI investigation. So this is a president who was a reality show guy, who loves fencing with the press, who knows he's got to provide not just one storyline, but 2 or 3 storylines a day. And we saw that all on display in the Rose Garden today.
All right, so when he mentioned Kavanaugh, which was eventually the story he would get to at his own timing, and said that he was not trying to rig or limit this FBI investigation, and said if they wanted to talk to Julie Swetnick or Michael Avenatti, Klein had at it. Is that likely to be deemed the case, or will the media still beat him up on these now new fears that it could all wrap up tomorrow? Not enough time to get to all of these people.
Well, the press wants a longer, more complete investigation. The Democrats are obviously moving the goalposts. Originally, it was 1 week, limited to just the witnesses and Christine Ford. I think this was probably inevitable. I think the president doesn't want to be seen as sort of choking this off unfairly if it takes another week. But obviously, the clock is ticking, and the more the investigation goes on, the more new questions could be heard. So, yeah, I think you have a collision here between a president and his party who want to get this done so they can get Kavanaugh on the high court, and many Democrats and some in the media who say, no, 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 it's not fair unless you talk to this person, and this person. And remember, it's not a criminal investigation, it's a background check. So I think this debate, this collision, is going to go on for some time.
All right, well, this is all I have time for. We're going to have to put the rest into another show another time. Seriously, good job, my friend. Good seeing you again.
We begin tonight with correspondent Kevin Cork, who was at today's combative press conference. He's at the White House. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, John. Wish you were over here. It was quite the scene, as you can well imagine. Actually pretty counterintuitive when you consider the tranquility of the White House Rose Garden to see the president really taking shots at Democrats who have been quite critical of his Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, in particular for his drinking habits during high school.
Look at Blumenthal. He lied about Vietnam. He never went to Vietnam. And he's up there saying, we need honesty and we need integrity.
In a caustic defense of his embattled Supreme Court nominee, President Trump today ridiculed Senate Democrats who've been sharply critical of Judge Brett Kavanaugh's drinking habits while in high school.
I happen to know some United States senators. One who is on the other side, who's pretty aggressive. I've seen that person in very bad situations. Okay? I've seen that person in very, very bad situations, somewhat compromising.
For President Trump, turnabout seemed fair play.
I mean, take a look at Cory Booker. He made statements that when he was in high school or college, what he was doing, he actually made the statements. And now he's talking about Judge Kavanaugh.
Today, the president said the same Democrats were intent on sinking his Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, at all cost.
It's unfair to him at this point. What his wife is going through, what his beautiful children are going through, is not describable.
Despite what he called unfair treatment, Mr. Trump remained optimistic that Judge Kavanaugh's bid to join the Supreme Court would survive fresh FBI scrutiny and agreed to an expanded probe into Kavanaugh's past.
I want them to do a very comprehensive investigation, whatever that means, according to the senators and the Republicans and the Republican majority. The one thing I want is speed.
While the president has doubled down on his support for Judge Kavanaugh,
I liked beer. Still like beer.
Today he offered a countervailing viewpoint of Kavanaugh's past drinking, noting that the nominee had no reported issues with alcohol as an adult. The president, who famously doesn't drink, then quit.
I'm not a drinker. I can honestly say I never had a beer in my life, okay?
Right.
It's one of my only good traits. I don't drink. Whenever they're looking for something good, I say, I never had a glass of alcohol. I've never had alcohol. I've just, for whatever reason. Can you imagine if I had, what a mess I'd be?
Well, there's that. As for the unnamed senator, John, the president refused to say who he was speaking of. He said he preferred instead to talk about that in an upcoming book, which would certainly be must and required reading here in Washington. John.
He certainly did call out a couple of other senators, though, as we saw earlier. Thanks, Kevin, at the White House. Let's talk more about all of this with Fox News senior political analyst Brett Hume. Brett, good evening to you. So the president has come forward over the weekend, talked with Don McGahn, the White House counsel, and said, let the FBI go down any rabbit hole they deem necessary to try to find out as much information as they can, long as you do it by Friday.
Right, and it's a little hard at times in all this to tell exactly what the investigation is supposed to be, how long it's supposed to last, and what it's supposed to cover. In fact, when Senator Flake was asked what he understood to be the credible allegations that were to be investigated, he said he was leaving that up to the FBI. The president says basically the same thing, but we do know that Trump, for all he says about letting the FBI do whatever it wants, he's also saying he's leaving it up to the Senate. And that means the Senate majority, that means the Republicans, who I think are pretty clearly setting the terms of this investigation. After all, how much can you do in a week? And you got, one allegation that seems most credible, the one we heard testified about. The other two look pretty sketchy to many people, and my sense is it's not clear how far the FBI will go with either one of them.
Other than putting a time limit on it, it doesn't sound like the FBI is being given any instructions as to who they can and cannot interview.
Right.
Is there any way to satisfy Democrats in this?
Well, it doesn't really look that way. I don't know. Flake is supposed to have reached some kind of an accommodation with Chris Coons, Delaware.
We saw the conference. Well, we didn't actually see the conference, but we knew that they were in that that
Right, they're the ones who hashed this out. It's not yet clear to me what exactly Coons gave up in exchange for the extension of this investigation for another week. It looks to me as if the investigation will go forward, and maybe Coons won't say it isn't enough. But already you're hearing from Mazie Hirono, who's a member of the committee, who's a Democratic senator from Hawaii, and others, that there should be no limits on this investigation, which would mean that presumably, theoretically, it could go on in perpetuity. I don't think that's going to happen, and the question then becomes, John, will this FBI investigation, assuming it turns up nothing new or meaningful, will that be enough to convince Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to vote aye? If it is, then I think this Joe Manchin, whom we just saw reported on, he might go along with it. If not, I don't think he will.
Flake's vote was predicated on having an FBI investigation,
right,
not what the results of the investigation would be. So ostensibly, we would think that he would be on.
Yeah, he said he's for it.
Yeah, so it comes down to the other two. A lot of people who were in Kavanaugh's position probably would have taken themselves out a long time ago, just because of the distraction, just because of the attention that's on them, the effect on their family. Why do you think he is so doggedly determined to continue on with this?
Because I think he feels that if he quit in the face of these allegations, which he believes, obviously, from what we've heard him say, are utterly false, that would tend to verify the allegations. And I think he feels that the only way he can be vindicated, although I think some of the damage to him and his family is permanent, that he'll have a stain on him because this has been so ugly. I think the only way he thinks he can get even partial vindication is by prevailing and being confirmed.
Britt, always great to see you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for dropping by.